Okay, so let's talk through the RFID console. The first thing to observe is the top left window here is the reader window, and this becomes self-populated by the readers that are detected on the network. All our readers put out a heartbeat, which you can see incrementing here, and so nothing you need to do here other than select the particular reader you're interested in exploring. There's a notification window beneath that, so I can basically select any particular reader here, and any information relating to that reader here, any notifications will be shown here. You can clear notifications and do that kind of thing as well if needed to. By the way, the clear reader list, if I clear the reader list, then all that does is allows that window to self-populate again, and it will just listen out for the heartbeats, and then the readers will self-populate based on that. So whatever reader I select here, you'll see under the Sensor tab on the right hand side, you'll see some basic information about that particular reader, module firmware, etc. You'll also see a couple of buttons down here. So if you want to reboot the reader, that's pretty self-explanatory. There's also a turn locator on, and that's the indicator light that's on the reader on the left hand side of the reader. And so if I go ahead and turn that on, you'll see first of all a notification over here on the status, and you'll see the light flashing on the reader. I'll go ahead and turn that off. Any changes you make to the reader can be saved. So as you go through making changes, if you would like those changes to be permanent after the reader has been rebooted or powered down, save the configuration will allow us to save that configuration, so you don't need to keep going back in and making changes every time you reboot or repower up the reader. So if you click on the network tab, this is pretty straightforward. So there's the IP setup here, and you can either, of course, obtain the IP automatically from a DNS server. In this case, I actually have a static IP, and then any of these windows, there's a configure or set button that you would need to hit in order to confirm to the console that you would like that change to be made. That makes the change for this particular session, this particular usage of the console. And again, if you want this to be permanent, make sure you save that configuration. Reader name, self-explanatory. You can see that I just personally named this particular reader. And then the heartbeat setup, probably don't need to change this much. I actually changed the default of the frequency of the heartbeat. The default, I believe, is every 30 seconds the heartbeat will be incremented and pushed out onto the network. So I just changed it to every 5 seconds, just so we can see it clicking away here every 5 seconds. That's the network tab. The RFID Setup tab contains within it a couple of sub-tabs. The antenna power is divided between read and write power, and obviously you can go ahead and change these however you would like. If you want to change this down to 27 dBm, for example, we can go ahead and do that. And the same on the right. The maximum power, of course, is 33 dBm. And then again, you just need to do update power settings, and again you'll get a confirmation over here. If you don't do the update, that will not hold. The other very useful thing on this page is the kind of traffic light signals we have down here, which indicate to us which antenna are actually physically connected. So if we have a green light, let's say, then that tells us there's an antenna connected to that particular port. In this case, I have a SensArray Pro without any external antenna connected, so as expected, effectively the 3 SMA ports are showing nothing connected. This is really useful, particularly in the field where you think you may have, for example, all 4 ports connected to antenna, and for some reason something's either disconnected or wasn't tightened up properly, and you can very quickly identify that kind of connectivity problem, and that I've personally found that very useful. I've actually used that logging into an international customer and seeing that there was something not connected properly. The next sub-tab is the antenna sequence. So this allows us to sequence between a different antenna. Now I only have one antenna connected here right now, but if I go ahead and say I actually want 4 different sequences, I could then pull down these individual menu items here and swap between different antenna. Now I do not have additional antenna connected here, so this doesn't make a lot of sense. I could certainly just leave these all on internal antenna like this, but again, probably doesn't make sense in my case. So that's where you go ahead and configure your antenna sequences, and again, update sequence once you've done that. And then RF mode. So we have a couple of different RF modes. So this is basically your FM zeros, your Miller 3s, Miller 4s, Miller 8s, etc., and some hybrid modes. And sensitive is going to be higher up on the Miller, and fast is kind of FM 0. And again, set RF mode if you want to go ahead and change that. Gen 2 settings starts getting into a little bit more gory details. Here we can either have a fixed queue or a dynamic queue. If you do a dynamic queue, it'll give you a range. Select parameters, so this is your 0, 1, 2, or 3. And again, same for query, and you can have either A, B, or dual here. Again, any changes you make here, go ahead and do a set parameters. GPIO Control pretty much does what the tin says. So here you can control your GPIO. Select whichever inputs and outputs you want to use. The updates is this is where we would update the firmware, and we occasionally we will offer updated either firmware or bootloader, and so this is where you would actually go ahead and do that. So that's the configuration. If we now go to some of the other tabs here, let's just take a quick look at this. Is an advanced tab as well that goes into a lot more details on some of the other more detailed capabilities. AutoSense, this is the little scripting language that we have that would enable a reader to do a number of tasks repetitively or in a loop, and remember those tasks regardless of the reader being rebooted or powered down and powered back up. So this is a way of waiting for a stimulus, going ahead and reading on certain antenna ports, sending the data somewhere. So it's a nice little automation tool without having to get in and start programming and opening up SDKs. Settings, by the way, this is very useful. So if you want to actually save the tag data being read by the console, this will allow you to change the file name and location of where you save it, and whether you indeed are actually saving all tag reads, none of them, or just the first reads. So I'm going to hit here, I'm going to do first reads only, and I'm going to save that. Then there's 2 read tabs as well. The detailed read tab again does what it suggests. It's important to note this on the bottom left. This is the reader dwell time in milliseconds. So it's important here to make sure you understand how many seconds here we're going to be dwelling on a particular reader. And if we go back to the reader configuration and the RFID setup, and we do the antenna sequence here, going to make sure that these make sense. And I have a very simple case here of a single reader and one reader, or two readers, sorry, and one antenna. But if you can get into silly situations if you're not careful. If you have the reader dwell time quite small, and if it's smaller than the number of antennae you're trying to read through. So let's say I do actually have 4 antennae here on my reader. and I would like to go through each one of these antenna, and for some silly reason I would like to spend 2 seconds on each antenna. Well, that's all fine and good, but I'm only going to read on that particular reader for 5 seconds before I'm going to go on and read on another reader. So in effect, what I've told the system to do is actually ignore these last two antenna here. Effectively, I'm not going to get to read them. So just bear that in mind. Let's just pop that back. I'll do half a second. And so yeah, bear that in mind. That's an important one. And then we can go ahead and we can basically just start reading. And pretty much as you would expect. So you can see all the gory details here. The EPCs, which antenna you read on, which reader we're reading on, how many we read over a short space of time, and how many unique tags we saw. Okay, we can go ahead and clear that list, and if you want to start reading again, of course you can. There's another tab which is the simple read tab, and that's just a much more simple way of looking at your tag data. The reason we've done it this way is because this console does look, of course, at multiple readers. So everything I've done right now is being done to the highlighted reader. So if I select a different reader over here, I can now go in and do the RFID setup for that reader, and I can then go ahead, clear this tag list, and I'll now be reading on the other reader. So you can actually see the reader numbers different here. So the cool thing about the console is that what I can now do is I can actually select more than one reader. So selecting 2 readers now, I can now go ahead and do a read, and I'm basically now reading across 2 different readers and all of their antenna. And again, we can go into the read tag data here and take a look at the details. So here I can see some tags that are being read on reader 1, and here I can see the tags being read on reader 2, and actually it's on the internal antenna on each of those readers here. And you can kind of scoot down and see some of the details.
One other thing I want to point out is that the start button on this page actually behaves like a concurrent start. What I mean by that is it will actually read from all of the readers you have selected on a configuration reader page. So it will actually read from 3 readers in this case. You can duplicate that on the read tags page by selecting start concurrent read. However, if you just hit the read button on this page, you'll read only from the current reader you have highlighted. So if I highlight this one, it will just read from this one, regardless of the checked items on the left. So just be careful of that.
Okay, so that's kind of a quick fly around the RFID console. It's a nice tool, great for configuration, and obviously reading and storing the tags as well.